Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, the pandemic landscape changes daily, and along with some of the frightening news, there is hope on the horizon. But we still have a lot to consider, both physically and mentally. So I'm delighted to welcome to LA Currents today RN Joanne O'Brien and psychologist Dr. Kokinda, both from LA City Medical Services. Nice to have you both with us again.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
All right, well, obviously the safer at home restrictions are becoming looser and looser, and a lot of businesses are open, a lot of opportunities to go to restaurants, but there are still precautions we should take. What are some things we should consider before we actually just run outside and do whatever we want to do?
Well, we first need to consider that we're still in the purple phase, which means that the infection is widespread. Even though we have hospitalization rates, death rates, and positivity rates going down. So that's why we can open things up a little bit. So when you go out, you still need to do all of those same public health measures, such as wearing a face mask, washing your hands, keeping that social distance. All of those things still matter. And when you wear a mask, it needs to be over your nose and your mouth.
Which is always so odd. When I see someone wearing it on their mouth, I'm thinking, their message has been pretty clearly established at this point. Right. But when you get into these businesses, a lot of them obviously are following all of the protocols that have been mandated from the CDC, but not everyone can be supervised at all times. So, you know, from a personal perspective, when you're going to these restaurants or to these businesses or stores or whatever, what are some of the things that you should look for to make sure that they are truly following what is safe for you?
You want to make sure that they have a reduced capacity, that they shouldn't have the same number pre-pandemic. For example, if they're allowed to have 100 people, maybe they only should have 25 right now. Public health has it spelled out pretty clearly per business how much or how many people you could have together at any one time. If you pull into a parking lot and it's full of cars and you don't see anyone waiting outside, that's probably a really good clue that everyone's inside and it's going to be too crowded and you're going to be around a lot of people, and that's not a good idea right now. So what you should see are people standing outside, socially distanced, at least 6 feet apart. You should see hand sanitizer accessible. You should see employees with face masks. If you're out at a restaurant, your server should be not only wearing a mask, should have a face shield on. The tables should be at least 8 feet apart. No TVs, because if there's something like a playoff game, the tendency is to stay the whole game, 3 or 4 hours, and you really don't want to be with a bunch of people from outside of your house, you know, longer than 2 hours, you know, at least. So those are some of the just sort of signs that you should look for even before you go into a facility.
Yeah, consider the length of time you're going to be with somebody. And you know, and we were just kind of joking a little bit about the mask thing, but there has been such a resistance to wearing a mask, not nearly as vocal as it was now, and now that there are mandates to mask. There's a psychology to that. Why are people resistant to wearing masks? What is it that makes somebody fight back for something like that?
Well, there's a lot of different things at play. One, culturally, America is a place of great independence, which is awesome, but also we don't necessarily like being told what to do sometimes. Individually, people might have some anxiety about the pandemic still, and not seeing masks, not putting one on. It's a way of sort of distancing yourself from what's really going on. It's a bit of, it can be denial. You know, people just assume, you know, I don't know anybody who's had this, it's not going to happen to me, and they hope that that continues for them, which unfortunately it doesn't for everyone, but those are some of the factors at play.
But at this point in time, I mean, it's been scientifically determined that masks are one of the greatest ways for us to protect ourselves, and now we're even talking about double masking. Is there a reason to double mask, and is there any kind of physical issue that is caused by wearing a mask or double masking?
There is no reason to not wear a mask unless you have some medical condition, such as you have to have oxygen all the time, and then even you should still wear a bandana, because the alternative is getting COVID-19, which could be deadly. In terms of a double mask, and it sort of gets back to the resistance, any mask is good. Let's just start with one, and if everybody would wear a mask, it would stop the transmission by a lot. And if we could sort of stop that, that would help and give us time to vaccinate. it makes sense maybe to wear a double mask. It's absolutely not going to hurt. If you put a barrier between you and that virus getting into your system, that's good. Right now, the CDC is actually actively studying the double mask. There's no science behind that yet, but they're looking at it. But common sense kind of says it's not going to hurt. It's okay.
But you're not breathing your own air is not going to cause you to have any long-term issues.
No.
Because there have been those arguments too.
But if you look at the medical and dental, has been wearing masks, veterinarians for many, many, many years. So yes, no, it's not going to cause any problems.
Absolutely. Well, part of all of this, and it's a big, huge learning curve, as you said, from a scientific standpoint, but also from a mental health standpoint. I mean, this has been a real trial for people over the last year. What are some of the things that you're seeing cropping up that are need to be paid attention to in the mental health world?
There's quite a bit. There's a lot of anxiety, of course, because even though now we're in a pandemic, wear a mask, things are different, it's still not been a steady ride. There's still news popping up that's new week to week, day to day. Politically, a lot of things have happened as well as the pandemic. So this has all created a lot of anxiety for people. So with anxiety, people are having tough time sleeping at night. Maybe they're drinking a little more or withdrawing socially. And this has also contributed to an increase in depression. So all of these things are popping up in the mental health world.
It seems like one of the most fragile communities, and we were even talking about this a little bit before we roll cameras, is the years in which you are the most social, or you're learning your place in society, or your friends are more important than your family when you're a teenager. And the horrible statistics that we're hearing, whether they're anecdotal or actual factual, the suicide rates in teenagers and the anxiety. What should a parent be looking for in their teenager in this particular time, and what can you do? Encourage
your teenager to stay connected with friends in ways that are healthy. It's following the guidance. It's safe to go outdoors and to have things outdoors. I know Joanne has mentioned walks or meet up at park, keep your distance, order a pizza where people can sit separately and you're not touching the same things, but you can still enjoy a meal with friends. All of these things are good suggestions for teenagers.
Until we can all get a vaccine.
Yes.
Which is this amazing thing. I heard the fact that prior to this point, the average time to put a new vaccine on the market is 3 to 4 years. And the turnaround on an international scale of putting these vaccines out here with the efficacy that they have is truly a miracle. And then we have all these options. So let's chat vaccine for a couple minutes here. Lots of different types of vaccines. Do they vary wildly, or are they basically all the same mechanism coming from a different source?
The two vaccines that are approved for use right now are the Pfizer and the Moderna, and they're relatively the same. Everybody's sort of heard the mRNA, which is a messenger RNA, and what they did is made a synthetic protein that makes the spike, which we all know is sort of characteristic of this virus. So it teaches your body, or it fools your body into making antibodies, which are the proteins that help you fight infection. So when your body, if you do get exposed to that and you do get sick, your body knows what to do and will fight off the infection. Both vaccines, the Pfizer and Moderna, require 2 doses, so they both are the same. They both have to be stored in a sort of a cold environment, the Pfizer colder. But the mechanisms are basically the same of the 2 that are available right now. So
there's no live virus in these vaccines.
None.
This is just a protein.
Correct. And then I think there's some misnomers about the mRNA changing the DNA, and in the middle of the cell, it's called the nucleus, is where the DNA is at. It doesn't go into that part of the cell. It doesn't change your DNA. So there's some people that are frightened about that. And for people that are frightened about a vaccine, I just challenge you to be curious, read, look it up. There's just, go to reputable sites. And talk to your provider, get more information so you feel comfortable.
And we'll go to resistance again. I mean, there's always been anti-vax people since the very beginning, but fortunately, smallpox actually had anti-vaxxers, you know, they were a little afraid of that, and thank goodness all of that went away because smallpox has been eradicated. We need to eradicate this virus before it gets out of our ability to control, which it could if we're not very conscientious. So what is the mechanism in someone's mind that makes them afraid of something that seems literally harmless and so helpful?
I think one thing that's at play with the vaccine, and Joanne touched upon it, is people don't really understand what's in it. They don't understand how it works, and that seems frightening. So it's easier to go on social media and see maybe what your friends posted and to share that and to feel comfort in bonding over, you know, opposition to it, because then you don't have to take the time to really read and understand it and go back to some of the science that you've possibly wanted to forget since, you know, high school when you learned about DNA and these types of things. So the real key is just to educate yourself about what's in it, just like Joanne said.
It's really hard to educate yourself when the information comes from so many different sources, which again, even trying to get a vaccine is a little bit of a puzzle. You know, to find out if you're eligible, when you're eligible, if you can get an appointment, not get an appointment, if you're on a waiting list, not on a waiting list. So, you know, so the resources seem to be somewhat scattered, but there are some really good resources to have more coherent information, are there not?
The Center for Disease Control is really a very good site. Your local public health departments, they keep the information current. It's there. City of Los Angeles has a site. I would go to reputable sites and not necessarily these things that are posted online. Go to some of the universities that are doing the studies. The information is out there, so take the time, and then again, talk to your provider about your own health needs and maybe your own concerns, and your provider hopefully knows you and can sort of alleviate that, because it's when you get a vaccine, it's not just about you, it's about the whole society. So we all kind of need to participate in this and all get the vaccine so we can get back to some sort of normalcy.
Right, as I heard earlier, you know, the vaccine knows no borders. It knows no delineation in counties and states and everything.
No.
So, but how is the rollout going? We hear a lot of dramatic news that there are shortages and that sort of thing. But in general, especially in Los Angeles, how are things going?
I think they're going very well. I think we have a super site. We've jumped on it. I think the LAFD has done a remarkable job of getting out there, getting to some areas where it might be difficult for people to drive a car, sign up online. I think they've tried to meet all those needs. And I think from a state level, we're supposed to be receiving more. So I think once this starts rolling, I think it's going to be really good. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. You know, you actually got me a really interesting site, you know, vaccinatecalifornia.com or .gov, I can't remember, and forgive me for
vaccinatec.com.
It was great because you just put in your zip code and it gave an enormous array of information for multiple counties about who has what, and it's contemporary, it's being kept current. So, you know, I'm glad that those kinds of resources are coming up. Sadly, unfortunately and tragically, some people, it was too late. And there's some pretty heavy burdens on people who have lost loved ones during the pandemic. So grief is something that has to be reworked in our society because we're not able to grieve the way we were. What are some of the things that people should be aware of and can do if they're suffering through the loss of someone they love?
You know, grief is always a heavy time, and it's a good time to reach out to friends and family. I know we can't do it the traditional way where you would gather, or, you know, if you do, it's outside with distance, but definitely reach out. The other thing is the pandemic and the lives lost to it, they come with a little more than just a typical loss. It often, there's, oh, I shouldn't have let them do this, or it feels more preventable because of the type of disease that's circulating, which is unfortunate because that creates an extra burden on those who survive. So definitely, if you notice you're struggling with feelings of guilt or maybe anger, reach out to a clinician. There's a lot of different groups and a lot of different clinicians who are there to help people work through this time, because it's more than what might come typically with a tragic loss.
Your guilt component is a really interesting point, that, you know, if you were the one who obviously inadvertently, accidentally, and without any kind of malice ended up to be the reason someone got the virus, got COVID-19, that's a tough one too.
It is, and unfortunately we've seen that quite a bit, because people mean well, or they do what they have to do, they go to work, and then they might unknowingly bring the virus home before they realize they have it, or, you know, there's just not options, because people have had to continue to go to work, do things to support their families and to get by. And unfortunately with that, the virus has been brought into homes. So with that comes heavier emotions than even just normal loss.
Does that still add a need for testing? With the vaccine, you know, the focus is turned to getting a vaccine versus getting a test, although test sites seem to be prolific and easy and almost really accessible now. Should we still be testing?
Absolutely. You should be testing and doing the vaccination, because you can see where you're at in terms of infection. How is your community doing? And not only that, is the virus changing? Because the more the virus has time to replicate, it can more easily mutate. So you need to know that early on if it's changing. So testing and vaccinations and the public health measures, all three of those things need to kind of go in tandem.
So if you've had the virus, are you still eligible to get a vaccine? I mean, is that something that you should get it?
Yes. Because we don't know what that means in terms of immunity, how long you're going to not, you know, catch the virus or get it again. We don't know how long. We think 3 months if you've had COVID, but that the science is still really early on that. The only time you really can't get a vaccine, or you have to wait, is if you receive the monoclonal antibodies, which is a treatment for COVID when you're really sick. Then you have to wait 90 days, but that's the only contraindication to getting the vaccine.
Do we know how long the efficacy of the vaccine works? I mean, we're too early in the game, but what do they guess? Do they hope? Do they pray? Is there somewhere?
They actually do not know yet.
Okay.
So, and that's part of the studies. That's part of the original folks that were so brave to be part of the studies. They're going to follow them and draw blood and keep an eye on that. So they don't know yet.
Well, we're just going to hope it's a super long time, or else we'll just go get our boosters the way we're supposed to.
Right, sort of like the flu shot every year.
Right.
Yeah.
Along the lines of how society has shifted and changed because of the pandemic, some of the more subtle things that I think are interesting from a psychological standpoint is we've lost a lot of our casual social experiences. You know, I read this great article in a magazine, I don't know if I can put your magazine, but about the barista that knows your coffee order, or the colleague that you used to just happen to run into at the copy machine and, you know, share anecdotes, you know, all those casual relationships. We're going to have to go through a real strong period of adjustment once we're all allowed out again, for real safely and more intimately.
We are. We've adjusted quite well overall as to the quarantine, the stay at home, which is important. Obviously, that's what we had to do, what we continue to do. But when that's not the case, it's not going to feel that comfortable to go and chat with somebody up close for a lot of us. You know, some people are continuing to do that or are welcoming in it. But at the same time, a lot of us are going to have to ease into feeling comfortable in certain social situations again.
Is there a more fragile group comparatively? I mean, we talked about teenagers a little bit. Kids, tiny little kids, seem to be, this is all I know, this is great. I mean, is there an area in which we should be really keeping our eyes open? You know, an age group or anything like that we should be aware of?
You know, adolescents most likely are a higher risk during this time, and then also when it opens back up, because they've worked so hard to isolate and to follow certain rules that a change is going to be a challenge. But any age group is susceptible to having a tough time with it. It's going to depend on the individual's personality, their environment. So it's best to keep our eyes open for anyone who could be having a tough time.
what are some of the self-check things you should do? I mean, I'm constantly saying, did I really say that? Obviously we have all joked over and over again to the point of annoyance, or what day is it? Who am I? What's my name? But, are there self-check things that we should be doing to make sure that, because it's hard to see yourself. It's hard. I can see, oh, you're not doing well, but how do I know I'm not doing well?
Well, the type of thing exactly like you just said, did I say that? How am I feeling? Why am I acting this way? A lot of looking inward, which we have time to do nowadays because there's not much else going on. But one thing that everyone is suffering from, whether you realize it or not, is burnout. And not because necessarily you're working so hard, which is what we used to think burnout meant, but it could be burnout from being at home with our spouse or our partner or our children, or burnout from being home alone, or burnout from being the one who has to go and face the pandemic day after day in a public service role or other necessary roles. So burnout comes with irritability, trouble sleeping, low energy, withdrawal. All these things might be signs of that. So it's good to keep an eye out and see if our behavior's changed, how we're coping with it, also what we might be drinking to cope with it. That's another thing that has been an increase in alcohol use lately. So all these things are good to keep tabs on.
And if we have realized that some of those, checking all these boxes, what should we do? What do we do? Obviously reach out, telemed or talk or whatever, yes. But are there things that we should just be doing at home, exercise, yoga?
Yes, stick with the basics,
well.
healthy habits, all of those things. It's not a good time to be reaching for the junk food day in and day out. That will affect our mood and our well-being as well. Try to get some exercise, even if it's just a short walk around the block each day. Not only does that give you exercise, but it gets you out of the home if you're someone who's been working from home, and it's a safe thing to do. So it's another good time to be creative and think, all right, I've taken my walk 9,000 times this year, it feels like. What else can I do to get some fresh air? Maybe you drive to a different park to get a change of scenery. All these things can help.
Well, and thank heaven some of these things are opening up. I mean, we have some beautiful opportunities in Los Angeles. We have some great parks. We have some, great outside space. We're very, very fortunate. We've got the weather, so we're not stuck, in blizzard conditions where we have nowhere to go. So that's really, really great. As far as a medical standpoint is concerned, how are you feeling from a medical perspective? How are you looking in terms of the rollout of the vaccine and the lowering of the cases that are positive and the lessening of the tragedy of the deaths towards COVID? Is it looking good from your world?
It's encouraging, and I think here's the scary part though, we just need to keep it up. We're not out of the woods yet, so we still need to, don't go out if you don't need to. Wear your mask, stay away from people, wash your hands, and absolutely get vaccinated. We still have a ways to go, but I'm really extremely encouraged, and I'm so excited that we have 2 vaccines, some more on the horizon. There's a couple of more, so I think the more vaccines that are out there, and if you have the opportunity to get a vaccine, for sure.
I'm not sure whether this is a fair question to ask or not, but the vaccine is actually a plant. It's something that's being grown to create these vaccines.
Right. I actually don't know the exact thing that they're growing, but yes, but it's synthetic. It's not real.
Yeah.
So it's not the virus. They're not injecting that into you. So you're not going to get sick from the vaccine.
And are you hearing good things about the rapid replication and production of the vaccine?
I am. They're ramping up, and I know we're going to get something like 1 million more doses and opening up 2 more super sites, one in Oakland, the Oakland Coliseum, and then one at Cal State LA. So I think we're going to see, and then also it's going to be distributed to local pharmacies, so which will be great for communities. Say people can walk there if they don't have a car, that kind of thing. So I think it's going to be more accessible. I think it's going to be okay.
And there are a range of reactions to the vaccine, but what are like the standard things that one would expect to feel after the first dose and then after the second?
The first dose, you might have a sore arm, feel a little achy, might have a small fever. The second dose, you're going to have a little stronger reaction. It's just like, because this is novel, it's new. So when this is introduced, your body kind of goes, well, I kind of don't know what this is and I don't feel very well. But the second time you get it, your body's like, okay, I know what this is. So your immune system is a little stronger. So those are very normal reactions. That means your body's doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and it's making antibodies. So you might feel like you might have a fever, you might have the chills, you might feel achy, headache, sore arm. Those are all very normal and just part of getting the vaccine.
When does it cross over to this isn't normal, please, I need to talk to somebody pretty quick?
If you continue to have real severe symptoms, really high fever, you start coughing, I would absolutely call your doctor.
Is there like a window of time?
I would say if this went on more than a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, I would call your doctor.
Right, and I'm sure there might actually be
yeah.
some psychological responses to getting the vaccine too, because it, as you said, it's novel, it's new, and we're all trying to do the right thing, but there's a little fear factor going on here too.
There is, especially when people see headlines about the few reactions that have happened, which is not abnormal for vaccines or medical treatment in general. But you go and you wonder, is this going to be me? There have been some people who have had to do their deep breathing and sort of sit there after the shot to make sure they check in with their body. They're concerned about something, but then they realize, the reason I felt short of breath is because I was anxious, and that was what happened. But and also with people getting the side effects from the shot, initially I know that's been concerning to a lot of people until they recognize that it means the vaccine is working, and then they start to dissipate and it goes away, and they're very happy then that they've gone through the process. But it takes a little mental preparation.
So what's the nicest thing we can do for ourselves as we're going through all of this? I mean, you talk about too much drinking and eating junk food. Those are comfort mechanisms, But what holidays? We all had a weird holiday season. What's a nice thing we should do for us? Should we all send ourselves greeting cards? You're a good person. Does that help? I mean, do silly things help?
I recommend everyone realizing you're living through something that's going to be in a history book. We look back in history and see some stressful times and think, oh my goodness, how did they get through that? Well, now we know. We're all still here. We're getting through it together, and that in itself is impressive. So pat yourself on the back and know you're going to come out of this much stronger and ready for anything after this time.
Maybe write notes, maybe journal a little bit. Because we'll all have stories to tell, that's for sure. I mean, who would have thought that the three of us would be hanging out as often as we do, kind of sharing information as it progresses. I mean, I'll never forget the first time you told me about why hand washing worked, because there's friction. So I thought that, there's lots of information. Well, if people are really interested in finding out what's going on in LA, I imagine, as you said, there's lots of websites, but, what's the website in which we can reach out?
I think it's corona/virus.la.
And it keeps getting more and more and more information going on.
So if
there.
and if you Google that, and they keep it current, it's got information about testing, vaccines, statistics in terms of what the city's positivity rates are, and it's very informational.
Okay. Well, thank you both for being such incredibly strong advocates for the right things to do and clarifying information. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate you having us and giving us the opportunity.
Well, we'll see you again. We'll have really even better news on the horizon.
Hopefully.
All right.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.